𝙎𝙬𝙬. During our stay in Rome, we were accommodated in this hotel. We immediately found comfort in its spacious dining area. It was just in time for breakfast. Take a look at this variety of baked goods. Croissants, cakes, waffles, pancakes, tarts. Everything looked absolutely mouth-watering. They even provided 2 double toasters for sliced bread and an impressive number of bread options. Next to them was a wide selection of jams to accompany your toast. On this side was a variety of ham and cheese, including a beautiful presentation of artisanal ricotta. Next to it was a number of different kinds of milk and plain yogurt. But what caught my eye immediately was the fresh raw honeycomb. Never had I seen it provided in a breakfast lounge. It made the whole setup look very fancy. It even dedicatedly came with a honey dipper. As usual, there were the breakfast staples. Here they offered sun-dried tomatoes, scrambled eggs, baked beans, and sliced wieners. The scrambled eggs here looked particularly appetizing. In the drink section, we could find the usual options: juice, tea, and coffee. Remember that in Italy latte means milk? I went with cappuccino for a proper coffee with milk. Here's what I picked for breakfast. It looked far more appealing than yesterday's plate, especially the scrambled eggs. They were soft, moist, and vibrantly yellow. Bon appetit! In the hotel lounge, there were these unique chairs, shaped like spinning tops in red and black. You could rock them sideways as you sat. They were so fun. I love a functional art piece. After breakfast, we continued our journey. Along the way, we passed Circus Maximus, Rome's first entertainment stadium, where they once held chariot races. It is also believed to be the original site of gladiator fights before the construction of the Colosseum. Not long after, we were dropped off and began walking to our next destination. The weather was drizzly and pretty cold that day. Today we headed for the Archbasilica of St. John Lateran, the oldest and highest ranking of the 4 major basilicas in Rome. But before that, we stopped next door to visit the Holy Stairs. This sanctuary was specifically built to house the Holy Stairs and the chapel above it, which holds numerous holy relics from the early Christian period. Because of this, it is considered one of the most important chapels in Rome. Intricate artwork and decorations adorned the walls and ceilings. Today we were accompanied by a different father who had been invited to join our pilgrimage for the day. He gave a brief introduction and shared the powerful history behind the Holy Stairs. The staircase is believed to be the very one from Pontius Pilate's palace in Jerusalem. The same 28 steps that Jesus climbed on the day he was condemned to death. There are bloodstains on the stairs that are even believed to be those of Christ himself. Because of this, the Holy Stairs hold profound historical and spiritual significance, as they mark the path that led to Christ's suffering, death, and resurrection. As an act of devotion, we too climbed the 28 steps on our knees, praying silently with each step. It was a humbling and sacred ritual that forged a deeper spiritual connection to the Passion of Christ. Photography and videography are not allowed in this space, so I will simply share my personal experience. The moment was incredibly powerful and emotional. I was so moved that I couldn't help but shed tears as I climbed the steps. And at the chapel at the top, I happened to meet a priest who offered me a blessing. As he did, I felt a sudden jolt, a rush of warmth running from my head to my toes. Overcame with feeling of immense gratitude and peace, I began to sob quietly. The priest gave me a warm, benevolent smile as I bowed in tears. A moment I will never forget. Among all the religious sites I've visited, none has touched me so deeply. It was one of the most meaningful spiritual experiences of the entire journey. A moment I would wholeheartedly recommend to any pilgrim visiting Rome. Located close to the Holy Stairs is the remnant of an old papal palace. This ancient structure features a mosaic apse and an epigraph depicting Jesus with 11 apostles, not 12. It is a small but historically rich site, adding another layer of depth to this sacred area. After our time here, we continued on to the Archbasilica next door. This basilica holds a unique honor. It is the oldest public church in Europe and the first among the 4 major papal basilicas. Before it was converted into a church in the 4th century, this building was known as the Lateran Palace. That history gives it its title as the highest ranking and most important basilica, as well as the title as the Mother Church of Catholicism worldwide and the Cathedral Church of Rome. As usual, we gathered in front of the basilica, where the father led us in a sermon before we entered. He shared insights into its history and sacred significance, preparing us spiritually for what we were about to witness. We then proceeded to the Holy Door, a large single-panel door with a sculpture of Mary holding baby Jesus and a depiction of Jesus on the cross in the background. Above it is a transom that features 4 panels, each representing the 4 occasions the door has been opened by 4 different popes during Jubilee years. As mentioned in previous videos, crossing the Holy Door symbolizes walking through Christ himself. So the Father invited us to pass through mindfully and respectfully, acknowledging its spiritual meaning. Inside, the basilica is a true historical marvel. Every surface, from the floor, wall, and ceiling, is adorned with massive statues, vibrant mosaics, gilded frescoes, majestic columns, and elaborate decorative elements. We also learned that this is where the Pope holds the Holy Thursday Mass during Easter week. Led by the Father and his prayers, we walked toward the high altar and took our seats at the pews, ready for a short Mass. After the closing prayer, we moved toward the grand altar and took a few pictures. This basilica is dedicated to 2 Saint Johns, Saint John the Evangelist, the beloved disciple and author of the Gospel of John, whose tomb is located here. And Saint John the Baptist, the forerunner of Jesus, depicted under the high altar. Near the statue of Saint John the Baptist lies the tomb of Pope Martin V, one of several papal tombs located in this basilica. Curiously, his tomb is littered by scattered coins and notes from different currencies, almost like a wishing well, perhaps left by tourists in reverence or tradition. After this, we were given some time to explore the basilica on our own. It was remarkable to see how every corner of the basilica is adorned with intricate detail, and yet it doesn't feel excessive or cluttered. There's a stunning harmony of design, from the gilded ceilings with balanced ornamentation to the marble mosaic floor tiles that feel both regal and sacred. We also found the statues of St. Paul and St. Peter, the patron saints of Rome and the cornerstones of the Catholic Church, watching over the space with their iconic symbols. St. Peter with his keys, and St. Paul with his sword and book. We stepped back outside and took a group photo before leaving the basilica. Did our bright orange tea stand out? Soon it was time to return to our bus. This site isn't very bus-friendly, so we had to walk some distance to where our bus was parked. Everyone was still in high spirits, smiling readily for the camera along the way. And here's our bus waiting for us. We then headed to our next destination, Vatican City. The journey took roughly 25 minutes, offering another glimpse of Rome. The view of the city and the roads from the bus window felt tranquil and soothing. The slightly higher vantage point from the bus made the scenery even more enjoyable, free from the obstructions of pedestrians or smaller vehicles. After a while, we were dropped off and followed our tour guide, walking through a tunnel and into a more crowded area. Even with 41 people, our group did an excellent job of sticking together. Before long, we found ourselves emerging into St. Peter's Square, right in front of the St. Peter's Basilica. As I walked closer and closer, I could feel my heart pounding with excitement. I had always dreamed of visiting this place. Its exterior is so grand and majestic, it almost didn't feel real. We quickly took a group picture here. We were originally scheduled for a papal audience with Pope Francis, but sadly, it had to be cancelled due to his declining health. As a result, we were given some free time later in the afternoon. For now though, we simply walked past the basilica, as it was time for lunch. The lunch area was a fair walk away from the basilica, but the route gave us the chance to pass by the ancient Porta San Pellegrino, a white brick archway that is part of the old city wall. Above the arch, the coat of arms of the Roman Republic was carved in stone. This emblem appeared at several gates that we passed. Eventually, we reached the lunch area. We only had 45 minutes for lunch, so we opted for something quick and simple and settled on this restaurant. What we ordered, a classic mushroom pizza to share. Lasagna, their traditional dish. It was moist, rich, and satisfying. Bite-sized fish nuggets with fries. It was a bit bland. Luckily, we brought our own dips to amp up the flavor. Then our dessert, a dark truffle ice cream, coated with cocoa powder and rich with a strong rum kick. As someone who loves alcoholic desserts, this was a personal highlight. Bon appetit! After lunch, we continued on to visit our last basilica. Passing along the same stretch of ancient brick walls, It seemed that each gate along the wall featured a unique coat of arms embedded into the structure. This remarkable masonry extended from Vatican City all the way to Castle 𝙬𝙬𝙀. The variation in cobblestones, shades, and textures suggested that the walls had been renovated and altered several times throughout history. During some of Rome's darkest moments, these walls offered a secret escape passage, known as Passetto di Borgo, for the Pope to flee from the Vatican to Castel Sant'Angelo. Today they hold immense architectural and historical value. Along the way we noticed the iconic cube-shaped cobblestones underfoot, known as St. Petrini or Little Stones of St. Peter, as it was first used in St. Peter's Square. These are mostly found throughout the historic districts of Rome and the Vatican, adding charm and texture to the ancient roads. Every corner of this city, from its narrow lanes and buildings to the very roads we walked on, carries layers of rich history. After walking for a while, we arrived at the plaza near the Castel Sant'Angelo. This area is where the tourist information center is. Our tour guide handed out prayer sheets, and we began lining up for our procession to St. Peter's Basilica. We waited for another group to go first, then began our own journey. Led by the Father, we prayed the Rosary, reciting the glorious mysteries, as it was Wednesday. At the head of our procession, we carried a cross bearing the Jubilee year 2025 logo. The emblem shows 4 figures in pilgrim cloak, journeying from the 4 cardinal points, embracing one another in a spirit of fraternity. They cling to a cross and anchor, symbolizing Christ as a banner of hope and faith. We took turns carrying the cross for each decade of the Rosary. After passing through security screening, we finally entered St. Peter's Square, continuing to recite prayers and sing hymns as we drew closer to the Basilica. St. Peter's Basilica is one of the most important churches in the Catholic faith. It is one of the 4 major basilicas in the world, second only to the Archbasilica of St. John Lateran in terms of ecclesiastical rank. It is also the most prominent building in Vatican City, and the square in front of it was built to accommodate tens of thousands of worshippers. Above the main entrance there are 13 statues. At the center stands Christ the Redeemer, flanked by St. John the Baptist and 11 of the Apostles. St. Peter himself is not included on the roof. His statue stands prominently in the square below. We approached the entrance to the Basilica. Our 41-person group kept up well despite many members being in their later years, and now we had finally arrived at the Holy Doors. The Holy Doors feature 16 bronze panels that illustrate significant biblical events, from the story of Adam and Eve to the resurrection of Jesus. As we entered, we were immediately greeted by Michelangelo's Pieta. This masterpiece captures the 6th sorrow of Mary, the moment when Jesus was taken down from the cross and laid in his mother's arms. It was an incredibly moving sculpture, both sorrowful and serene. After switching the cross-bearer, we continued toward the grand altar at the back of the basilica. The ceiling and wall artwork looked divine, a shining example of Renaissance architecture. Every element was highly detailed and meticulously arranged, embellished with golden ornaments and sacred murals. We completed our procession at the high altar, where we finished with prayers and received a blessing from the priest. altar itself was majestic. The towering bronze canopy or baldachin featured a dove, symbolizing the Holy Spirit and the church's spiritual shelter. Beneath it sat a golden chair, the cathedral patron, symbolizing the Pope's authority, and just under the altar lay the tomb of St. Peter. The massive spiral columns surrounding the altar truly stood out. Compared to the other three major basilicas, this one felt even more grandeur, elaborate and sublime. Have a look at the details. Yet, despite its magnificence, the atmosphere just felt different. With the constant movement of tourists filling every corner, it was difficult to find a moment of stillness. In many ways, the sacredness and serenity of the basilica seemed overshadowed by the crowd. It felt more like a tourist attraction than a place of worship. One thing I noticed was the marble floor tiles, which looked ancient. Our guide mentioned that parts of the Colosseum's marble were used in constructing this basilica. Perhaps these very tiles were among them. They also contributed to the basilica's cool, stone-chilled atmosphere. Next, guided by our tour leader, we exited temporarily to visit the catacombs beneath the basilica. To get there, we walked through narrow corridors with low ceilings, low enough that I could easily reach up and touch them. Here we saw the tombs of previous popes. The older tombs were adorned with stone effigies, sculpted in the likeness of the popes in eternal rest. In contrast, the more recent tombs were more restrained and minimalist. Thanks to our guide, we finally reached the tomb of St. Peter himself. The area was like a labyrinth, and with the dense crowds, the pathway became quite stuffy and confusing. St. Peter, as the first pope, is deeply venerated, so pilgrims from around the world come to pay homage and take this sacred memory with them, including us. Some areas below were off limits, such as a private chapel and a few ornately decorated corridors. The ceilings were covered in murals, and some wall frescoes were now protected by glass, likely to prevent damage from careless hands. As we continued through the narrow passageways, we eventually emerged directly beneath the grand altar, at a spot just under the statue of Saint Andrew. Nearby stood the statue of Saint Peter, depicted with one hand raised in blessing, seated on a throne, holding the keys to the kingdom of heaven. In front of him stood two bronze torch holders, carved with detailed depiction of the journeys of St. Peter and St. Paul. These were custom-made to the basilica and added a sense of narrative majesty to the space. Every single piece of art in the basilica was a masterpiece, breathtaking in both concept and execution. After our time inside, we exited the basilica and gathered for another group photo with our tour banner. Then it was time to board the bus and make our way to our next destination. Our next destination was the Trevi Fountain. Since there was no place nearby for our bus to park, we had to walk the rest of the way. Given the size of our group, it took about 30 minutes to reach the fountain. This part of the city was lined with tenement houses, a bit crooked and weathered. Still, their aged appearance and the narrow cobblestone streets added a unique charm to Rome's character. You could really feel how ancient everything was. The driveways were made of these cobblestones, but the pedestrian paths, thankfully, were paved with flat stone tiles, great for the elderly in our group. Despite how narrow some of the alleyways were, they still managed to accommodate bikes, cars, and street stalls, with pedestrians cramped in one single lane. Passing by these fruit stalls brought back a wave of nostalgia. As we got closer to our destination, the crowd thickened. And finally, we arrived at Rome's most iconic fountain, the Trevi Fountain. Just look at the crowds. There was even a long queue just to get up close for photos. According to local tradition, throwing coins into the fountain carries symbolic meanings. Tossing one coin over your left shoulder means you'll return to Rome someday. A second coin means you'll return and find love with someone local. A third coin means you'll return, fall in love, and marry that person. It's said that around 3,000 euro in coins are collected daily from the fountain, all of which are donated to charity through the Catholic Church. While we were there, we also stopped to try some gelato, located just beside the Trevi Fountain. There are plenty of gelato shops around here, but this one caught our attention due to its prime location. The group was excited to try real Italian gelato, so of course I got one too. It looked really cute and fancy, but to be honest, the taste was just okay. After spending some time at the fountain, we traced our steps back to the bus. The return walk was quite long, so some of the older members of our group opted to take an Uber instead. Night walks in Italy felt romantic. The glow of the neon signs and warm street lighting made a beautiful and memorable stroll. On to our next destination. Our next spot was the Colosseum in Rome. Since our papal audience was cancelled, we had extra time to visit this ancient wonder. Known today as the Colosseum, this was once the largest amphitheater of the ancient world, famously used for gladiatorial games and public spectacles. The evening lighting made it even more stunning against the night sky. I was curious about the many holes on its walls, and our tour guide explained that the Colosseum was once covered with limestone slabs called travertine. These slabs were later repurposed, including for the construction of St. Peter's Basilica. Unfortunately, we didn't get to explore the interior due to time constraints. Hopefully, I'll have another opportunity to return during its opening hours. Still, it made for an incredible backdrop for our photos. Thank you for taking us to visit this historic marvel. As you can see, it was a little too late for the younger ones. Our dinner that night was at a Thai restaurant in Rome that also offered Malaysian and Indonesian dishes. The space was just enough to sit our 41-person group, and by the time we arrived, many of us were exhausted but hungry. The poor girl could barely stay awake for dinner. It was past her bedtime. The food arrived while I stepped out to wash my hands, and everyone had already dug in. We had soup for entree. This spicy tangy soup was incredible. No wonder it was nearly gone by the time I returned. One of the best tasting dishes we'd had in Rome so far. Even the simple dish was surprisingly delicious. Rich and authentic in flavor, just like back at home. This one looked great on the plate, but the fish had very little meat, so we could barely get anything of it. Most of it remained untouched. The highlight of the dinner, crispy, savory, and addictive. This became everyone's favorite dish after the soup. It was gone in seconds. Yummy! Veggies, a staple we didn't want to miss. Fresh fruits for dessert, a real luxury during our trip, refreshing and much appreciated. This was hands down the most satisfying meal we had in Rome. After days of Western foods, everyone was craving rice, and this dinner really hit the mark. Bon appetit! 다음 금이 𝙍𝙤𝙢𝙚